All right, success. Hello and welcome to Power Lunch yet again with 1,000 conversations talking about the techier side of the Green New Deal. I am your lovely and charming host, Rebecca Evans, sustainability planner with the City of Ithaca. And today we have a really exciting conversation with the one and only Tom Knipe, Director for Economic Development with the City of Ithaca and our resident community wealth building wizard. So welcome, Tom. And of course, we have Director of Sustainability, Aguirre-Torres, to banter, I guess, back and forth for about 45 minutes today. If you have any questions, we have Delia on the YouTube chat. Please feel free to drop your questions into the chat and we will make sure that they are funneled to Tom and Luis. And otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Tom and Luis. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's as always a pleasure to be here. And Tom, we are really, really excited. We've been talking about this for a while, and I think it's just so cool that you were able to join us today. And before we get started, this is it's an interesting season. This is the beginning of the year, and there is a lot of activity, from the government, industry, the community. But what was your break like? What is the beginning of the year like for you right now? Are you busy? Are you focusing on something? Do you have New Year's resolution? Are you trying to lose weight?
Well, I moved to Ithaca in 2009 to go to graduate school from Portland, Oregon, and I loved climbing mountains in Portland. And when I had the opportunity to stay in Ithaca, I said to a friend, I love Ithaca, but I'm really going to miss the mountains. And he said, well, let's go to the Adirondacks in the winter and climb mountains there, and you'll get the feeling of climbing real mountains. And I've been doing it ever since. So I just got back from my 43rd high peak. So that's on my mind right now, is just enjoying. I really enjoy the outdoors, and just got back from another trip to the Adirondacks. I've been going every MLK weekend for the last 10 years.
God, does that mean you're in shape? Like, do you practice every day, go walking, jogging or something, or
no, I think it's more of like a long-term muscle memory thing. You hike and run enough, then it's really more about the gear. You got to stay warm and stay safe and all that. So,
and you take the family, or is it just you?
My peak bagger, I think, is my 10-year-old Eleanor. She's done 3 high peaks in the winter now.
Oh God, what are you doing to her? She should be just chilling, playing video games with her friends, but there you have her having a healthy life. What kind of parent are you? No, it's that sounds really cool. I didn't do much. I'm kind of the opposite of you. Like every time I talk to you, I realize how different I am, and it's very embarrassing every time. So I'm gonna try to do more walking. I'm inspired already by this conversation.
Well, I seen you on your bike, Luis. So
I know I look good, right? I make that bike look good. I know.
I think you have an e-bike, so you definitely look better than me. I have an old beater from the mid 1970s that I ride to work on.
Well, that's cool. And you mentioned that you moved to Ithaca when in 2009?
Yeah, I came in 2009 to pursue a graduate degree in city and regional planning at Cornell. And I was actually working in the bike industry in Oregon and was a total bike nut, and thought, well, I want to get really involved in policy and planning, and sustainability actually was sort of my driving interest for pursuing a planning degree. And while I was there, I think that happens for a lot of people in graduate school. I got turned on to other stuff, including economic development, which is what I do now. And I had the opportunity to work with Susan Christofferson there at Cornell, who really helped me understand what economic development, the practice of economic development, could be and could mean for communities. I had a completely different impression coming in.
Oh, well, let's use that. What if I ask you, what does it mean? What does it mean to work in community development? What does it mean to be, an economic development wizard? I believe that's where you were introduced today. So.
Well, I don't know if I deserve that, but well, what I love about economic development is it's it's kind of the intersection of the private sector and the public sector, the intersection of community interests and private interests, the intersection of people's aspirations in terms of job opportunities, business development opportunities, and the community's aspirations in terms of sustainability and prosperity. And so it's a very nuanced field, right? And I'm someone who really ascribes to a sustainable local economic development approach as a preferred approach. Not that I discount the value of traditional approaches to economic development, which tend to be focused on export-based industries and job creation, tax-based growth. Those are all really important things to focus on to grow local prosperity. But I'm sort of interested in the question, so what? Why are we doing this? What's the purpose?
Yeah.
And for me, it's about improving livelihoods. It's about expanding opportunity and making sure that everyone can benefit from that local prosperity. So that's what gets me excited to come to work.
So in a way, we're talking about promoting sustainable prosperity. We're talking about local development, and I like that you said it's not all about jobs, or at least not the traditional perspective in terms of job creation, right? I mean, there is an element of community wealth that needs to be built into the planning, and the community needs to benefit from that. So the idea today was a little bit to talk about that. So I'm going to use this as a terrible segue, to be honest, but still I'm going to take it to go into community wealth building. This is something that gets thrown around all over the place. If anybody, I talked to some of your students actually, and they were telling me that that is a term that everybody uses, but not everybody understands. So what would be, if I am not into economic development, if I am not an expert in everything that you do, how would you explain this? I mean, what does it mean, community wealth building, and what does it have to do with economic development?
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't think it has to, but I think it can sort of stand somewhat in opposition to the main mode of economic development, which puts, the private accumulation of wealth and profit, as the primary goal of economic development. And, perhaps, we're also trying to achieve opportunity for everyone and addressing racial disparities, geographic disparities, other disparities, but often that's an afterthought or an add-on, or something that's nice to have with an economic development program. I think community wealth building puts that first. And there are a lot of different strategies. I hope we can talk about some of them today, including some of the things that I'm working on and things that I'd love to see happen here locally in Ithaca as part of our Green New Deal initiative. Maybe some things we can work on together, Luis.
That'd be cool.
What all those strategies have in common is they seek to expand local ownership, and ownership at the individual and family level, but also ownership at the community level. And a big part of that is sort of democratizing access to resources and participation for people who may have been kept out of those opportunities in the past because of historical inequities, et cetera.
Does that happen in our community? I mean, do you have a good sense of whether this is something that is urgent to address in our community, or is it similar to other places? I mean, how do you see that? This disparity in terms of wealth.
It is urgent in our community. In fact, I'm remembering a presentation that I heard from a Cornell researcher very recently, just before the pandemic, at our countywide economic development agency's annual meeting. Ithaca Area Economic Development invited this person to come and talk about the racial wealth gap here in Ithaca and Tompkins County. And not surprisingly, actually, it was, very much, on par with what we see nationally in other communities, with a very large racial wealth gap. And that has a lot of implications for health, for livelihood, for I'm interested in entrepreneurship and business development, and and it certainly has implications for ability to access those kinds of wealth creation opportunities that come from entrepreneurship and business ownership. And so it does exist. I think we're perhaps more conscious of it, I hope, than some other communities, and also very actively working, to try to address it in various programmatic ways, et cetera.
That sounds really hard. No, I mean, I haven't been here for long enough to really have an absolute sense of how things are. But I do notice a few things. I have seen these disparities. Like even the way we refer to things is different in the different communities. And right now you talked about ownership, for example, and you also talked about access to infrastructure. Could be education, could be health. Are we also talking about other issues like financial inclusion? Are we talking about this racial divide that you just mentioned that currently exists? Does it extend to pretty much every area of economic development? I mean, how do we cover this? I mean, this is just mind-boggling when you think about it, no? And that today, 2022, we're still seeing these huge differences, and people are still thinking in terms of conventional economic development rather than taking community well-being and making it the core of the strategy. So I did say a ton of things. I didn't ask you anything, but it's just and I can't help thinking about every conversation that you and I have had, and I think I was particularly impressed with one program that you had, right? Which is, I think it's RISE. Is that the name of the program? So I don't know if you could address everything I said, including that.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's important to acknowledge the challenge, but also not be, to still work on it, right? I mean, because that's what we need to do. Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have chosen to work at the local level for a reason, right? I mean, we need national policy. That's important, but we also need creative local initiatives that help address those core issues. And so let me talk a little about RISE. We know that one of the biggest challenges for any small business to be able to grow and be successful and be a sustainable business is to be able to access capital. Like, let's say you're making a food product like a hand pie, and you need to buy this, you're at the level for your business where you need to buy a piece of equipment to do your process faster and therefore be more profitable, et cetera. So how do you do that? Traditional way is you write a business plan, you put together your cash flow projections, you show how you've got customers and they love you and they love your product, and you're going to be able to pay back this loan, right? The challenge that a lot of businesses have is that unless you have collateral, meaning you already have money or assets, and or strong credit, even with a very good business idea and demonstrated ability to follow through on your commitments, you're going to be very challenged in accessing that business loan to be able to grow your business. And so what we've done here locally, working with Alternatives Federal Credit Union and the local Small Business Development Center, is we've replicated a program that the SBDC in Albany, partnering with the State Employees Federal Credit Union, put together to create a character-based loan program. I mean, it's not the only character-based loan program that exists.
But can you
loan programs are a thing?
Can you expand what it means? Character-based.
Yeah. Basically it means it removes credit and collateral from the decisioning process for underwriting that loan, and replaces it with character, other alternative means of giving that business owner the ability to demonstrate that they're a good bet. They're likely to pay back the loan. Now, why do banks take credit and collateral in the first place? Banks aren't in the business to lose money, right? So they do that to secure the loans. So how are you going to secure the loan if you don't have credit and collateral? So it's a little more complex, right? You have to really think through, well, okay, how are we going to support these businesses with training, with ongoing technical assistance and support? And so we put together a training program. We put together an underwriting process with AFCU. AFCU created a loan pool through their alternatives impact, their not-for-profit side. By the way, CDFIs, AFCU is a CDFI, a community development financial institution. This kind of thing is what CDFIs are in the business to do. And so we're so fortunate, here to have a CDFI like AFCU that, is part of their mission to serve the community in this way. And so, yeah, it's been going pretty well. We've got the training modules set up, and there are.
Do you have people registering already? I mean, people are participating in the program.
Yeah. I think there's well over a dozen participants in the program right now, and a handful have also received loans. And by the way, one of the things that AFCU did, which I think was, really smart, is they took the loan underwriting process and democratized it, which is what we're talking about here with community wealth building, right? They established a committee of community members to be able to evaluate the loan applications and then make the decision, the lending decision, which does a lot of things, right? It builds capacity for that whole process. It brings people with knowledge, of the community and those businesses into the process, and hopefully, reflects the community's, wishes and aspirations in that way. So, yeah, it's a really cool program.
It sounds awesome. I mean, talk about social innovation for real, and what other things do you have? I mean, because one of the things, and for people watching, the reality is that you and I have conversations every so often, and we have talked about this a little bit. And, every time I talk to you, I get the idea that, we should be doing this, at massive scale. We should be doing this in the entire country. And you have a ton of ideas. I don't know if you want to share, some more of your ideas. What else would you do? And how would you use, the power of government, to actually even, take this even to the next level?
That's the wave the magic wand question. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you about some of the other things that I'm excited about that I'm working on right now. And by the way, you asked about the power of local government. I do love working, for a local government at this level. But, ultimately my role and our role is often one of sort of being a convener and being a catalyst. And, certainly we can have helpful policies, but, often those who have expertise to provide the services, with the specific, knowledge about whatever you're trying to do are outside government. And so it's really about partnership and collaboration, and that's how we're able to achieve anything really that we do achieve. And so another example of a program that I'm working on now is, well, the working name is the Ithaca Exchange. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to roll this out here in the next couple of months. So it's very kind of early stage still. But what we're doing is we are taking advantage of a change in the federal tax code and in basically SEC regulations that allows many small investors to invest directly in companies. I don't want to bore our audience with too much arcane detail, but you didn't used to be able to do that, right? You used to have to be a qualified investor, meaning you have an extremely high net worth, et cetera, because it's a little riskier to invest in small businesses. So what the SEC did is they created all these portals and platforms to manage some of that risk and manage the compliance around the SEC regulations. So folks may have heard of investment crowdfunding, right? There are platforms that exist like WeFunder, Honeycomb Capital. There's, I think, well over 30 platforms in the United States right now that are doing this, and some of them specialize in different ways of helping small businesses do capital raises. But as far as I know, there's only one other place in the country that said, okay, let's take advantage of this, but let's really promote it at a local level and have it be about local business development. And at the same time, cultivate local investors. And the whole idea is very easy to understand. Really, it's about, we all have businesses that we love, that we frequent all the time. We're customers. We know the owners, and so and we love supporting them. We saw that during the pandemic, right? Like so many people really did shop local and support their local businesses that were having, that were challenged by the pandemic. And so converting customers into many, many small investors is a way to allow businesses to access capital to grow their business. But do that in a very different way. Instead of going to a bank, they're going to their community. And it's also keeping our community's investment, or some of them anyway, some of our local investment dollars local. Many people have small retirement accounts, some flexible investments that they may have. So the proposition is, what if just a small portion of your investment portfolio was in local businesses where you get to choose, where you want to invest, and then you get paid back over time. It's not charity, it's investment. But instead of having to invest $50,000, I can invest $100, $250 in 5 or 10 companies and feel really good about supporting my community and feel connected to that business in a whole different way. And hopefully see return on my investment in that way. Yeah.
It sounds cool. And I think, at the core of, the two examples that you provided, it is the community, it's local investors helping local businesses, is, community driven advisory board to determine character for loans, all of these things, they seem to be, community driven. And, I in the Ithaca Green New Deal, when we talk about it, and we always say that, we're trying to elevate social capital. We're trying to, work with the community and the connections and the values and the principles that make our community quite unique, and but it sounds a lot like, what you're talking about, if we were to switch economic development and put that at the very center, I mean, would we be getting closer to what you consider community well-building in that way? Or what else do we need to do to actually say we have an office that is in charge of community well-building in Ithaca?
Well, I think a lot of the initiatives that we've been involved with, trying to incubate and support are, moving in that direction. And look, I'm fortunate in that we have a community of economic development agencies that have certain core aspects of our local economic development function covered in a way. We have Ithaca Area Economic Development that's really laser focused on growing our high-tech manufacturing sector. We have Rev and Cornell that is really good at supporting certain types of high growth potential startups. Our Downtown Ithaca Alliance is in fact an economic development agency themselves and does a ton of work to support downtown businesses here and create a positive business environment. The chamber does a lot. I mentioned AFCU. There's a lot of different groups doing different things, and so one of the things I've done since I've started here is, sort of tried to figure out, like, well, where does the City Office of Economic Development fit in all that, and what value add can we bring to the whole community in terms of an approach to economic development. And yeah, I mean, I think if you look at Plan Ithaca, if you look at the Ithaca Green New Deal, and if you look at the City of Ithaca's core values and principles as like articulated in those plans and policies, then yeah, this is what we should be doing here in the City Office of Economic Development, is focusing on community wealth building. It also, excites me, and so it's good to work on things that excite you. So yeah, but there's a lot more we need to do, Luis. I mean, there's a lot more we can do to draw upon other models.
Like what other models? I mean, do you have anything in mind? Like, has anybody done this the right way, in a way that sticks, or are we trying to innovate in that bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are examples, right? You brought Lomax Campbell here from Rochester, the Rochester Office of Community Wealth Building, and so that's a very interesting model. The Cleveland model. I think for this to really have the kind of impact that it can, I think you need more than one office working on it. You need your anchor institutions and broad community awareness and buy-in around what community wealth building is, what it's trying to achieve, and what investments need to happen to move us there. And I think we may be at the beginning of that, but we're sort of not there yet. But I think that these initiatives can sort of prove the case, that we can actually move the needle by doing these things, and then hopefully that can be you can expand on that. So what else do we need to do? I think about cooperative ownership. Worker cooperatives is a model. We do have some worker cooperatives here. Most people are more familiar with the consumer cooperative. Green Star, for example, is a consumer cooperative. Great example of a co-op model for a grocery store. But cooperative ownership as a business model, it's changed since the 1970s, right? And it's actually, there are places that have really focused on this, like Burlington, for example, and promoted and provided assistance to businesses who want to either form or move into a cooperative ownership model. And I'd love to see us do more of that. We actually have some great local experts and resources that could help us with that too.
But it all sounds like, going back to, what are we doing in government, right? I mean, why are these offices, sitting within local governments? And from what you are saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, because what I'm understanding is that, you need to have the ability to convene people and then articulate a new type of partnership, and a partnership that it's, obviously with the business community, but also with the community itself. And it's about how we can define new channels of communication and ways of helping each other, to make progress. Would you say that's at the core of what we're talking about?
Sure. Yeah, I like how you articulated that.
But because I just, when Lomax Campbell visited Ithaca, he has this strategy for Rochester, and I think it's exciting. You hear him talking about it, but also, we had a conversation about the frustrations that comes, with trying to implement an aggressive community wealth building program, and how slow progress seems to be. And I always wonder, what does success look like? If we were to get away with the Ithaca Green New Deal, with, sustainable, inclusive economic development, and if we were to create really wealth for the community, and this sustainable prosperity could be shared by everybody. I mean, what is that picture in your head? I mean, can you articulate that? I mean, I know it's a tough question, but what does success look like?
It's the right question to be asking. I think about that a lot, and I don't have a perfect answer for you. I can, give some ideas, but I think it all comes back to this question of ownership and wealth, we can measure that. We can measure that at the individual and family level, so I think in some ways you value what you measure, and I think what you're saying is you're sort of calling attention to the need to create metrics that will tell us whether these efforts over time are having the kind of impact. For example, is the proportion of local firms, is the ownership matching the ethnic diversity of our community, or do we have fewer Black households owning businesses as a proportion of the Black households in Ithaca and Tompkins County than white households? We can measure that. There's actually a great group out of Drexel University, the NOAC Center for Inclusive Prosperity. They partner with MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth to create an index. So we can do that. We can peg ourselves to that kind of index and measure our progress over time. And one of the things I'm going to be doing in the next year is developing a scope of work for a city economic development strategy. One of the core outcomes of that will be to try to answer your question in more detail, like, okay, how are we going to actually measure progress? And I think that'll be a really exciting, fun, creative process, actually. Maybe at the end of it, we'll come up with some metrics that nobody else has thought of, right? That are really cutting edge. Maybe we can be that national model that we always like to be in the, yeah.
Exactly. I think, what we're trying to do is very complex. And if you look at some of the, demographic information, and you look at, probably 10%, are minorities in the city. But when you look at, within those groups, what, for example, the level of education or home ownership is disproportionate still, and so you have, 45% of white people in Ithaca own a home, but you have 1% of brown people in Ithaca own a home. And, when you see those disparities, I mean, how do you address this? Because it has to do with a number of things, how they made it into this country. It has to do with the level of education, proficiency in English language. So how do we go about, compensating for that and creating something that is actually fair, for everybody? And for example, somebody was asking about electric vehicles. And, I'm going to go there because, that's kind of an area where I am comfortable in. But I've been thinking, we should bring electric vehicles to Ithaca and we should distribute infrastructure. But then somebody asked, like, yeah, but, those things are expensive and I don't even have access to credit. So how do I get my hands on an electric vehicle? I mean, is that something that we could address, together, the Ithaca Green New Deal and the Office of Economic Development? Would that be constructive? Would that lead to, what we are trying to create here? What do you think? Creating the tools for people to participate in this.
Yeah, I do think so. And, behind your sort of question is this thing you run up against a lot, which is, you get pushback for on a creative initiative that is designed to address some of these underlying issues and has shown potential to do so, maybe in an incremental way. But we get hung up sometimes by thinking that if it's not a silver bullet solution, if it's not a 100% solution, then it's not worthwhile. And I just think I kind of reject that thinking. outright, because the world is complex, and it's not one thing. It's a variety of things, and honestly, we have to, if we're really going to be bold about this, we have to be willing to fail too. We have to be willing to say, okay, we're going to try and do something innovative here, and this is our objective. We're going to measure ourselves against that objective, and if it doesn't do what we intend it to do, well, we tried, and now let's move on to the next thing. And if we can have some successes, then we're moving in the right direction. I also think change is not linear, Luis. I think that we need these successful models working so that when the community is right, when the policies at the state and federal level are right, when we see the groundswell of grassroots support, at the level where we're ready to flip to that model, then we know what to do, right? Because we've been working on it, if you will. So that's part of it too for me. Like, I don't lose sleep over the fact that it's not going to be perfect, So
that is, I mean, that's what we have to do, because honestly, what is that phrase? There is this bridge in Paris that is very famous because in 1968 somebody graffiti over it saying, to be realistic, we need to shoot for the stars, and it stayed there. It is preserved, and that graffiti says, the story of everything that is happening since 2020. We need to demand more from our leaders. We need to demand more from our community. We need to demand more from us as human beings and members of the human race. And we need to, it's not that we're setting ourselves up for failure. On the contrary, we're just going for everything, and we're going to take whatever we can, but in an effort to really, really change things dramatically. So let me ask you a very difficult question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you were like, somebody tells you you have the right to define one extremely bold measure, one really bold program that will change things, what would you go for?
One really bold program that would change things.
Yeah, something really aggressive, because I mean, you've been talking about how, you believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've been talking about how we need to start changing the way we look at economic development, the way we look at inclusive growth. Even, the definitions that we have for economic prosperity and financial inclusion need to change, because the definitions themselves might not be enough for what we need to achieve. So, okay, let's say somebody tells us reinvent society, reinvent this. What would we do? I mean, if you ask me with sustainability, I'm not sure I'll be able to answer one single program, but given that I'm passing it to you, I'm very happy to ask the question. What would you do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think when maybe 10 years ago, I would have a better answer for you, because I would have confidence in the one solution. And I have to go back to what I said earlier, that I actually don't think it's one thing. And I think that, I think incrementalism and an incremental approach is actually a very valid approach to achieving our community's goals. I think that I think if we can better articulate a vision for what shared prosperity actually looks like, because as you said at the top of our call here, there are these buzzwords that are thrown out, right? Community wealth building, shared prosperity, inclusive growth. Sometimes it sort of becomes a little bit like it just words, right? If we can define that, I actually believe very strongly in the value of good strategic planning, where the process itself brings the whole community together to develop a shared vision for where we want to go, and then articulates very clear priorities that are shared priorities as well around what we're going to do to try to achieve that. and we link those activities with, lead agencies and resources and timelines, and we hold ourselves accountable and we do it. So, of course, leave it to this planner to say, that a good plan is the thing that we need. But I do think that that'll sort of help move us in the right direction, and I'm excited to sort of help work on that in the next.
I can't help thinking about the Cleveland Browns when you talk about this. The reality is that they realized they were a very bad team, at some point, and they decided to do without the traditional way of building a team. They brought the guy that had this movie, and then started building this with analytics, with a different strategy. And they say it's going to take many years for things to change. Surprise, surprise! 8 years later, they are in the playoffs, and you're like, oh, they might be onto something. But it was about planning, deciding on a strategy, being patient, implementing it, fixing things as they went along. And is that what we need to do here? I mean, because I am of the idea that we can't wait anymore, man. I mean, the reality is that it is heartbreaking to see people homeless when the weather is what it is today. It is, heartbreaking to see that we have COVID and people don't have access to health or to education. It's just terrible things. So I think we're in a rush, but at the same time, we need to do it right. And I agree with you. We need to plan and we need to do it properly.
Yeah, but we need to act when we need to have bold action too. I don't disagree with you at all.
But do you think COVID presents a different opportunity for us to act differently, think differently?
I hope so. Certainly did in the summer of 2020. I mean, we created a whole bunch of new programs. We started working together in completely different ways, much better ways, much more collaborative. And it was also a moment, let's not forget, when there was a racial justice reckoning going on at the same time. And so, within the economic development community, every agency is sort of putting out their DE&I message and proclaiming their commitment to addressing inequities. I think we need to hold ourselves and hold each other to account on those commitments, right? Because it's very easy to go back to the status quo and the way of doing things before. And you were starting to see some of that, right? We're coming out of the pandemic, but it's an exciting time to be working in this field. I got to be honest. There's so much innovation and creativity and new thinking and sense of urgency, and people like you who light a fire under me, so I can stay inspired and keep working on this.
No, I mean it's really cool to hear you talk about everything that you are doing, everything that you're planning to do. And I agree with you. I think, we owe it to the people. I honestly believe that it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be the community demanding more, as government. We're supposed to lead, convene, articulate, create opportunities. We are a catalyst for change. And at times we are the opposite, and we are changing, and we're not the only people who think that way. But there is a need for, rethinking the role of government, rethinking, what a model of shared governance could be in this community. And I think you are setting, all the pieces right now. And, I'm very happy to partner with you and try to change the world, because, that's kind of what we need. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, we're already partnering, and I'm sure many good things to come. And yeah, thanks for your leadership on the Green New Deal initiative too. I think you've shown us that kind of bold action coupled with strong expertise and leadership can do things like help us establish the electrification program here in the city of Ithaca, which is something that I think has the potential to be that really strong model that other communities can take inspiration from and act on. And so let's take that, let's be successful with that, let's make sure that's successful for everyone, and then let's let's grow our success from there in other areas. And I'm really glad that you're also focused on the economic development sort of leg of the stool, if you will. It's one that often gets forgotten when we're talking about sustainability. But it's, if we're going to achieve environmental sustainability, we need to have prosperity, right? And we need to have that shared prosperity. So there, I just used a term that has no meaning yet, but
but we're gonna give it meaning, a different one.
I think that is actually a really great note to end on. But before that, Luis, you did me the wondrous favor of surprising me with a question at the end. So I'm gonna return that favor to both of you. I'm curious, given the complexity of all of these issues, what is your motivation to keep working on this? Is it family? Is it the future of this crazy little town, fame and glory? What keeps you going?
You asked that of Luis first, right?
Sure.
Well, a lot of the, in the environmental movement, and I always say this way, right? I mean, people think about living a world better than one we found. And, I always think it's not life after death, it's life before death. It's about enjoying, like a better planet, a better world that I'm building to share with my children, not to, for them to enjoy eventually. So I think what keeps me going is, the possibility that I can create and share a better world with my children, with my friends, with my family, and everybody that I don't know, but that I know will benefit from this. So that would be my over-the-top answer probably to the question. So now goes to Tom.
Yeah, my answer is very similar. I think a lot of us that are in local government ultimately are motivated by a desire for impact, right? The notion that our efforts can actually support positive change. So that's a big part of it, and also just the people that we work with. As I said, we collaborate and work in teams on almost everything we do, including teams outside of local government, and those relationships and those teams, I think are and supporting each other and celebrating success and commiserating when we fail, just that human connection and working together, is something that definitely motivates me as well.
I love that. And I think, it's so nice to hear both of you say that, because, so often the humanity and the compassion is kind of stripped away from our professional work, not necessarily just in local government, but, we kind of lose sight of why we're doing this and who we're doing it for. So that's really nice to hear. And I think a really excellent note to end on. So thank you, Tom and Luis, for joining us, and everyone on YouTube. We will see you next time at noon live on our YouTube channel. And again, thank you so much, Tom, for joining us today. It has been very enlightening and enjoyable. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really fun.